analytic insight of consequence, analytic insight of philology, analytic insight of knowledge. What states are neither good nor bad? At the time when mind consciousness element arises that is inoperative, neither good nor bad nor the resultant of action, accompanied by mental pleasure, associated with knowledge. X accompanied by mental pleasure, associated with knowledge, with instigation. P accompanied by mental pleasure, not associated with knowledge. Accompanied by mental pleasure, not associated with knowledge, with instigation. P accompanied by indifference, associated with knowledge. Accompanied by indifference, associated with knowledge, with instigation. Accompanied by indifference, not associated with knowledge. Accompanied by indifference, not associated with knowledge, with instigation. Develops jhana characteristic of the plane of form. Develops jhana characteristic of the formless plane that is inoperative. Neither good nor bad nor the resultant of action. Pleasant living in the present existence. He, having wholly passed the state of nothingness, by the abandoning of pleasure, attains and dwells in the fourth jhana accompanied by perception of the state that is neither perception nor non-perception. At that time there is contact, there is non-wavering. These states are neither good nor bad. Knowledge of these states is analytic insight of consequence. That philology by which those states are designated. Knowledge of the actual philological definition of that is analytic insight of philology. That knowledge by which he knows those knowledges thus, these knowledges clarify this meaning, knowledge of knowledges is analytic insight of knowledge. P. Each should read with their appropriate introductory and completing sections. CDHS. Para. The four analytic insights are the analytic insight of consequence, analytic insight of origin, analytic insight of philology, analytic insight of knowledge. 3 analytic insights arise in the 4 types of consciousness associated with knowledge from the good states characteristic of the plane of desire in the 4 types of consciousness associated with knowledge from the inoperative states. Analytic insight of consequence also arises in these and arises in the 4 paths and 4 fruits. Analysis according to Abhidarma. Interrogation. The 4 analytic insights are the analytic insight of consequence, analytic insight of origin, analytic insight of philology, analytic insight of knowledge. Of the 4 analytic insights, how many are good? How many bad? How many neither good nor bad? How many with cause of bewailing? How many without cause of bewailing? P equals remaining appropriate triplets and couplets. The triplets sometimes are good. Sometimes are neither good nor bad. Sometimes are associated with pleasant feeling. Sometimes are associated with neither painful nor pleasant feeling. 3 analytic insights sometimes are productive of resultants. Sometimes are neither resultants nor productive of resultants. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is resultant. Sometimes is productive of resultant. Sometimes is neither resultant nor productive of resultant. 3 analytic insights are not grasped, are objects of the attachments. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is not grasped, is the object of the attachments. Sometimes is not grasped, is not the object of the attachments. 3 analytic insights are not corrupt, are not objects of the corruptions. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is not corrupt, is the object of the corruptions. Sometimes is not corrupt, is not the object of the corruptions. 3 analytic insights are accompanied by initial application, accompanied by sustained application. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is accompanied by initial application, accom-panied by sustained application. Sometimes is without initial application, sustained application only. Sometimes is without initial application, without sustained application. Sometimes are accompanied by zest. Sometimes are accompanied by pleasure. Sometimes are accompanied by indifference. Are not to be abandoned either by the first path or by the subsequent paths. Have no roots to be abandoned either by the first path or by the subsequent paths. 3 analytic insights sometimes are cumulative. Sometimes are neither cumulative nor dispersive. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is cumulative. Sometimes is dispersive. Sometimes is neither cumulative nor dispersive. 3 analytic insights are neither of the 7 supramundane stages nor of the final supramundane stage. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is of the 7 supramundane stages. Sometimes is of the final supramundane stage. Sometimes is neither of the 7 supramundane stages nor of the final supramundane stage. 3 analytic insights are low. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is low. Sometimes is immeasurable. Analytic insight of philology has low object. 3 analytic insights sometimes have low objects. Sometimes have sublime objects. Sometimes have immeasurable object. 3 analytic insights are intermediate. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is intermediate. Sometimes is superior. 3 analytic insights are of no fixed. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is a right fixed. Sometimes is of no fixed. Analytic insight of philology should not be said to have either path as its object, path as its cause, or path as its dominating factor. Analytic insight of consequence does not have path as its object. Sometimes has path as its cause. Sometimes has path as its dominating factor. Sometimes should not be said to have path as its cause or path as its dominating factor. 2 analytic insights sometimes have path as their object. Do not have path as their cause. Sometimes have path as their dominating factor. Sometimes should not be said to have path as their object or path as their dominating factor. 3 analytic insights sometimes are risen. Sometimes are not risen. Should not be said to be bound to arise. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is risen. Sometimes is not risen. Sometimes is bound to arise. Sometimes are past. Sometimes are future. Sometimes are present. Analytic insight of philology has present object. 2 analytic insights sometimes have past objects. Sometimes have future objects. Sometimes have present objects. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes has past object. Sometimes has future object. Sometimes has present object. Sometimes should not be said to have either past object, future object, or present object. Sometimes are plus internal. Sometimes are external. Sometimes are both internal and external. Analytic insight of philology has external object. 3 analytic insights sometimes have internal objects. Sometimes have external objects. Sometimes have both internal and external objects. Are not visible, are not impingent. The couplets. Are roots. Are accompanied by roots. Are associated with roots. Are roots also accompanied by roots. Are roots also associated with roots. Should not be said to be not roots, are accompanied by roots, or not roots, are not accom-panied by roots. Are with cause. Are conditioned. Are not visible. Are not impingent. Are not material. 3 analytic insights are mundane. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is mundane. Sometimes is supramundane. Are cognizable by one way. Are not cognizable by another way. Are not defilements. 3 analytic insights are objects of the defilements. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is the object of the defilement. Sometimes is not the object of the defilements. Are not associated with the defilements. 3 analytic insights should not be said to be defilements also objects of the defilements. Are objects of the defilements but are not defilements. Analytic insight of consequence should not be said to be defilement also the object of the defilements. Is the object of the defilements but is not defilement. Sometimes should not be said to be the object of the defilements but is not defilement. Should not be said to be defilements also associated with the defilements or associated with the defilements but are not defilements. 3 analytic insights are not associated with the defilements, are objects of the defilements. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is not associated with the defilements, is the object of the defilements. Sometimes is not associated with the defilements, is not the object of the defilements. Are not fetters. Are not ties. P are not floods. Are not bonds. Are not hindrances. Are not perversions, have objects. Are not consciousness. Are mental concomitants. Are associated with consciousness. Are conjoined with consciousness. Are generated by consciousness. Are coexistent with consciousness. Accompany consciousness. Are conjoined with, generated by consciousness. Are conjoined with, generated by, coexistent with consciousness. Are conjoined with, generated by, accompany consciousness. Are external. Are not derived. Are not grasped. P equals complete as for defilements in previous para. Are not attachments. Are not corruptions. Are not to be abandoned by the first path. Are not to be abandoned by the subsequent paths. Have no roots to be abandoned by the first path. Have no roots to be abandoned by the subsequent paths. 3 analytic insights are accompanied by initial application. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is accompanied by initial application. Sometimes is without initial application. 3 analytic insights are accompanied by sustained application. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is accompanied by sustained application. Sometimes is without sustained application. Sometimes are with zest. Sometimes are without zest. Sometimes are accompanied by zest. Sometimes are not accompanied by zest. Sometimes are accompanied by pleasure. Sometimes are not accompanied by pleasure. Sometimes are accompanied by indifference. Sometimes are not accompanied by indifference. 3 analytic insights are characteristic of the plane of desire. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is characteristic of the plane of desire. Sometimes is not characteristic of the plane of desire. Are not characteristic of the plane of form. Are not characteristic of the formless plane. 3 analytic insights are included. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is included. Sometimes is not included. 3 analytic insights do not tend to release. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes tends to release. Sometimes does not tend to release. 3 analytic insights are of no fixed. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is of fixed. Sometimes is of no fixed. 3 analytic insights are surpassable. Analytic insight of consequence sometimes is surpassable, sometimes is not surpassable. Are without cause of bewailing. P equals complete as for defilements in earlier para. Interrogation is ended.